Hello, everyone, and welcome to Deconstructing Leftists. Today, I want to spend a few minutes talking about my thoughts about the State of the Union speech by President Donald Trump. And I am doing this before I have a chance to watch any of the spin from the Democrat critics. I do expect that it was probably vicious and full of lies. And I don't even have any desire to put myself through that, but I will plan to do it for the benefit of my audience because I will try to look at some of the stuff that they're saying and hopefully get a chance to deconstruct some of that. But today, I watched the State of the Union address. I've watched it twice, and I am just simply going to comment on my thoughts about it before I see the negative feedback from the left. The first thing that President Trump did early on in the speech was he began to talk about some of his accomplishments just in 1 year as being president of the United States. And one line that really stood out to me is how he said, "Our nation is back." And he said, this is the this is the golden age of America. I do believe that it absolutely can be the golden age for America. I do think we have a long ways to go at this point, but I do believe that we have turned in the right direction. That's my opinion of where we are right now. I've seen a lot of things improve, but I do believe there's a lot of areas that we still need further improvement. But it's a night and day improvement over what we had under President Biden. President Trump said that he inherited massive inflation from our former president, Joe Biden, and there is no doubt about it. It is the worst inflation that I have seen in my lifetime. The closest that I ever saw of inflation like we had under Joe Biden, you had to go all the way back to the Jimmy Carter administration to see inflation that was even close to it. But what we experienced in Biden's term was even worse. I saw prices on some everyday items that I was buying like double in the store. Some items went up more than twice as much. We had that situation with the eggs, and they went up from sometimes less than $2 a carton to, when I saw it at a high point, I think there was 1 week I went into the store and it was over $9 for a dozen eggs. It didn't stay that high every week, but it had gotten up that high briefly, and it took a long time to come down to where it's at now. It's still higher than it was before Joe Biden, but eggs are much more reasonable again. It's not even in the same place as it was when Joe Biden was the president. And the same thing was going on with other items. It wasn't just eggs. They'll use that chicken flu or whatever it was, and the fact that they overreacted to it. They're not going to say that, but that had a lot to do with it. And it killed a lot of chickens that didn't even have it. And that led to an egg shortage. Again, this was all going on under Joe Biden, but it wasn't just that went up. I saw prices of bread go up like 50% on every loaf, and I watched certain cat food go up. Some cans of cat food went up from like $1.19 to $2 a can. And this was just typical. And you start thinking about, you go in there to buy your weekly groceries and you have everything in the store going up like that. It really adds up, and it really hurts you when your wages aren't going up with it. So he did inherit massive inflation. Now, I think that most of us are hoping to see prices start coming back down. I think a lot of people are hoping they'll come down to before the prices like they were before Joe Biden, was responsible for the massive inflation that we had. I doubt that we're going to see that go down that low again. I wish we would. And maybe things will surprise me, but it's very rare that you ever see prices come back down like that. But if you look at the inflation rate and how much it's slowed down today compared to where it was under Joe Biden, it is a night and day difference. It's just normal inflation. It was abnormal under Joe Biden. President Trump talked about how that the borders were open when he took office, and now they are secure. That you were no longer seeing illegal immigrants flooding our country like they were before. As a matter of fact, hardly any are able to enter the country anymore, and many are even self-deporting, and others are being escorted out of the country. So he has done a great job in securing the border. He wanted to make it clear, and I'm glad that he did, that we are not, as a nation, against all immigrants like the Democrats tried to make out. He said that he is welcoming of immigrants, but he's talking about legal immigrants that come into this country, want to really be Americans and really love this country. A lot of the ones that we're having coming in here really are only here because they're benefiting in some way or another by being here financially, but they don't love this country. Their allegiance is still to the country that they came from. And they never learned the language. They never learned to really become like Americans. They're only here because of self-interest, not because they love this country. President Trump made it clear he is for immigration of people that want to be here because they love America and they come in legally. He mentioned about how fentanyl entering the United States has decreased by 56%, which is really great. And in later part of his speech, he mentioned that he had actually listed now fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction. And he also talked about how that they were stopping boatloads of fentanyl from being smuggled into the United States. A lot of the time they would do that with smuggling them in with the pretense that they were just simply fishermen out there on the water. A lot of Democrats and liberals have accused President Trump of just killing innocent people on boats. They don't have any evidence of that. That's just something that they're saying. It's just talking points. I guess they would rather keep seeing the fentanyl coming into the United States and killing Americans because they really don't seem to care anything about Americans. But that was going on, and President Trump has lowered the amount of fentanyl coming into this country by a very large amount. He said 56%. He mentioned about gas prices coming down. Yes, they definitely are coming down from where they were. I think that we are hoping they'll come down even lower, and I'd like to see diesel prices coming down lower. And I believe they will if we continue with his drill baby drill policies, which he actually used those words, that was his official policy. He mentioned about mortgage rates coming down, making it more affordable for people to buy a home. And he also said in his speech that the state of our union is strong. So anyway, those are some of the main things that he said early on as he was talking about some of his accomplishments as president of the United States in his first year, just in his first year. He then went on. Now, there were other things that were taking place too, by the way. The American hockey team was there and recognized. He recognized several different people, veterans that certainly deserve to be recognized. He had several people that were there being honored throughout the speech, but for the sake of not going extremely long on this video, I'm going to try to more or less talk about some of his policies and things along those lines in discussing what took place in the speech. He is wanting to put Americans first. That's a major thing that he has made clear in his speech. Americans come first over people from other nations that are here illegally. Now, I do want to also make the point that when we talk about Americans, we are talking about all Americans. That means Americans who are simply white men or women. It's African Americans. It is Hispanics that came here the right way and did everything legally, or no matter what country somebody came from, if they're an American citizen, American citizens are all equal and they all are to come first, which only makes sense to anybody with any sense. Of course, we know Democrats, we know that they don't always work, but look at things with common sense or decency or anything. But nevertheless, President Trump spent a lot of time talking about the need to put Americans first. He spoke about how that he gave us massive tax cuts, which he had done back in his first term. And the Democrats wanted to vote to get rid of the tax cuts. They were ready to raise taxes on all American citizens. They voted against the bill that he was trying to get through that would keep those things in place. And in addition, no tax on tips, which I think is long overdue. I personally believe that these people that work in restaurants, largely for tips, they should not have taxes on their tips. And I think that it was long overdue, and I'm glad that President Trump made that a priority to get it done. And it wasn't a bill that Republicans passed, Democrats all voted against it. The Democrats also voted against by voting against the bill, voted against some of the other key provisions like no tax on overtime, which is something that I didn't even realize they had passed. That is a wonderful thing for a lot of working class people. No tax on overtime. And no tax on Social Security. And what a blessing that is for senior citizens who worked all their life to be able to earn these benefits and no tax on it. That's something that was well overdue as well. And so I applaud President Trump for that. He, again, showed that the Democrats didn't support these things. You know, he always claimed like they're the party of the working people, but they say something and do something different when they're actually called on to vote for these things. He is wanting to give a tax credit for people who have auto loans if the cars are manufactured in America. That is a wonderful thing for working people, and it's also a wonderful incentive to our car makers in America. That would really give a boost to them to be able to do that, to get a tax credit. You know, I mean, people have been able to do that with a tax deduction on their mortgage. Now you'll be able to do it with when they buy that car and they have a car loan, as long as it's American made. He mentioned about something called Trump accounts. He insisted he did not give it that name, but they would be tax-free investment accounts for children. And this is to get them started off early in life. 25 million American children, according to President Trump, already eligible. And if they are able to have their parents contribute into these accounts on a regular basis, that just like, you know, we have these retirement accounts, it's possible that their accounts can grow to over $100,000 by the time that they graduate. And he said that they can go to trumpaccounts.gov to sign up for it. I thought that was a wonderful thing as well. He mentioned about tariffs and how they have greatly benefited America. He also talked about how that his hope is that as a result of money coming from tariffs, eventually it will substantially replace income tax. That would be wonderful, wouldn't it? That was what used to fund our government for the most part, was tariffs. And then they went to income tax. Well, wouldn't you rather have money coming from goods from foreign countries paying for the budget than money coming out of your pocket? Thought that was a wonderful thing that he's doing there. He came against the U.S. Supreme Court decision that he is no longer has the power to just, you know, come up with tariffs to try to get his way on things. My opinion about that is I don't really have real fault with the U.S. Supreme Court over this. I've thought about that, and I feel like that they were interpreting the Constitution the best that they believed it was saying, and I think they were probably correct. As much as I support President Trump, I think that the Supreme Court was right, and I think that it may be too much power, really, to allow the president, any president, to have. And even though I love what President Trump is doing, I do fear what kind of things would happen if, say, a Democrat president had that kind of power. So I think that the U.S. Supreme Court decision was the correct one, but I was also happy to hear that agreements have already been made between President Trump and other countries as a result of the tariffs that he had already been imposing before, that he can't do that anymore the way he was doing it. And that most of these deals that were already made are going to remain because, as he said, a lot of these countries fear that if he has to rework deals with them again, it might be a worse deal than what they already got. That whatever would go through Congress and whatever, but the rework deals might be worse. So most of them are just content to just leave things the way that they were. So even with the decision by the Supreme Court, yeah, it may slow things down a bit in his abilities here with, threats with tariffs. But again, I do think that they made the right decision. It also shows me, again, we do have an independent Supreme Court that is really trying their best to interpret the Constitution. And it's so refreshing to see that compared to what we've had when we've had progressive judges. We've had progressive judges on the court that just make their own things up as they go along. It does seem like that, except for the 3 liberal judges on the court, there are 6 judges who are actually trying to interpret the Constitution properly. I think they did get it right on this, even though I do support the tariffs. And so I am on, it's not that I'm against President Trump's side on this. It's that I just think they did make the right decision. And I do have to look ahead at what could happen with a Democrat with that kind of power. He mentioned that Democrats were the reason we have the high inflation, which is true. And he also mentioned that they are responsible for murderers entering our country at the border, the porous border. Matter of fact, I remember when the governor of Texas was trying to secure the border on his own. The Biden administration was constantly trying to make them tear down any of the places where that the wall was secured. They wanted the illegals to just keep coming into our country. They were even at one point, I remember, trying to even bring them in themselves because they clearly have an agenda that is not America first. I don't even know why anybody supports the Democrats, except for people that hate America, and maybe that really is the deal. I was talking in another video about how that the people that seem to be against President Trump seem to be a coalition of New World Order and globalists. And I guess they look at themselves as citizens of the world rather than American citizens. I think it's absolutely disgraceful, but that seems to be the way the Democrats are and their main supporters. He mentioned about the damage that the so-called Affordable Care Act, he called it the Unaffordable Care Act, and the harm that it's done to people, but it's been making insurance companies rich because the payments were going to insurance companies. I can tell you that I didn't benefit from the ACA. It's driven my company insurance that I get where I work through the roof, and the benefits are not as good as what they used to be. And anybody that works alongside of me will tell you the same thing. Nobody likes the ACA here. And that seems to be the thing. It may have benefited some people, but it hurt a lot of other people, and it did drive prices up. President Trump wants to stop giving the money to insurance companies and give it to the people themselves to take care of their own insurance needs. And that is really a great idea. It's something that I really hope that they do end up eventually passing. And he also mentioned that in his first term, he had set it up where they were requiring maximum price transparency. And the Democrats, upon taking office, immediately did away with that. And it makes you wonder, what are they getting kickback-wise from the insurance companies that they would want to do away with price transparency? But yet the Democrats undid that immediately upon taking office when Joe Biden took over. He is also working to lower prices on prescription drugs. And he was talking about how that we've now got most favored nation agreements, and that instead of America having the highest prices in the world on drugs, that they are now becoming the lowest prices in the world for drugs, and how that prices have come down as much as 300 to 600, and even in some cases, perhaps as much as 800% on certain drugs. And he said if people are wanting to look into this, they can go to trumprx.gov. Again, he's just like he said on the other thing. He said that he didn't come up with the name, but that is where you go. So if you want to see if you can get lower prices on your prescription drugs, you can go to trumprx.gov. He also mentioned that he wanted a type of payer protection program in place that would that would actually cause energy prices to come down. And here's what the deal was on that. It was a rate payer protection program. He's wanting everybody that's involved in AI to pledge to build their own energy plants. And the reason for that is because AI uses so much energy that it's actually going to drive up the prices of energy. So he's getting agreements to do this, but they would have to build their own plants. It will take away a lot of the strain off of the current energy plants, lowering prices for everybody. I know right now, electric prices have gone through the roof, and that has happened a lot this year. There was policies already in place more than a year ago under Joe Biden that were going to drive them up. I ended up buying solar panels, and part of the reason for that at the time was because they were talking about energy prices going sky high, and a lot of it had to do with environmental regulations that were in place. Well, we're seeing that now. We're seeing the energy prices go through the roof. And he was talking about part of it probably is because of the AI technology, but he's saying that it uses a lot of energy, but as soon as they start building some more plants that they're going to pay for, it will take stress off the current grid, and you will start seeing a reversal of that, and prices will start coming down. How much, I don't know. I don't know if they will. This is just my opinion. I'm just giving you my opinion on things. I don't know that you're ever going to see the energy prices back down to where they were unless you do away with a lot of more of the environmental policies, and maybe they will. Some of the things that they claim are to stop so-called global warming, which I totally believe is a scam. But how much it would come down, I don't really know. But I do think that it makes a lot of sense. It's actually something I really hadn't given much thought to, how that AI would actually drive up energy costs. I mean, I knew about a lot of other things that were driving it up, but that's something that President Trump has been concerned about and is doing something about. He talked about home ownership. Now, the thing I thought about this is not capitalism at all. This is not a conservative thing that President Trump is doing. It is something to genuinely just help Americans. I would think that most people who are capitalists would probably welcome these big investors coming in and buying up oodles of single-family homes very cheap because they've got some kind of issues with them, and then restoring them and flipping them for really high amounts of money that nobody can afford. And he actually is trying to put something in place to stop them from being able to do that so more people can buy homes. Again, that is not a conservative idea. It is the opposite of what normally capitalists would want to do. I'm a little bit unsure how I feel about this as a conservative and as a capitalist, but I can see why he's wanting to do it. And I do see the problem with allowing them to keep doing this, these mass investors. He also asked that the ban be made permanent. I remember years ago when Rush Limbaugh was talking about President Trump, then it was just candidate Donald Trump when he was talking about this, and he was saying that Donald Trump really isn't a real strong conservative like some conservatives. He was somebody who was trying to fix problems, and that his reason for running for president was to fix problems, not to be just across the board typical conservative. And that's really been true of Donald Trump. Even if I have some slight disagreements about certain things he wants to do, I really applaud him for trying to fix this country, because I really believe he loves America and he's trying to fix things. And I really applaud him for that. And so if I've got some little minor concerns about things like this, so be it. But I do feel like his heart's in the right place and he's trying to fix things. And for those who think he's some kind of a right-wing kook or whatever, a real right-winger, this is the kind of thing that shows you he's really not. That he's really just looking after the interests of the American people. So I applaud him for that. Again, I'm not so sure as a capitalist, as a conservative, as a traditional Republican. Really, most of my life. Well, actually, I was a Pat Buchanan style Republican. I've always been America first. I've always been okay with tariffs, but sort of a Pat Buchanan type Republican. I'm not sure what I really think about this plan, but I'm still, that's fine. I do care about Americans being able to afford homes, and I do see the problem that's coming from this. So I'll just leave it at that. He mentioned about how he is committed to protecting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. A lot of Democrats, they're always saying that Republicans don't want to keep these things. They want to destroy them. And they are not capitalist programs. This is examples of a type of socialism that was put in place. Part of it back in the days of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Some of it happened during the Johnson administration. A lot of conservatives would love to get rid of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Me personally, I'd like to find some kind of an alternative to them. But at the same time, again, this shows that President Trump is looking after the American people. And it would not be the easiest thing in the world to do away with these programs. It would be very hard, and you'd have to come up with an alternative and some kind of a way to wean people off of them. And people that have already been paying into them for years have to get their benefits. It's already been paid for. And I would expect to get mine because I had to pay into the program since I started working at age 15. They didn't give me a choice. So everybody, even if they don't agree with Social Security in principle or Medicare and Medicaid, I think they realize that people have paid into these programs through their tax money. And it's been taken from them without their approval. So as such, these programs, you can't just take it away from people. And I would be upset if they just took it away from me when I didn't have any choice about it being taken out of my check. So he is planning to protect Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And as he pointed out, nobody else is doing that. And they're not. Our budget deficit keeps growing greater and greater and greater. And a lot of it because of fraud and because of illegals and getting benefits that they're not entitled to. That's taking away from money that could be going to save Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. So again, I look at this as, again, another example where he's not across the board pure conservative, but he is trying to solve problems and he is trying to help the American people, and I do applaud him for that. He mentioned about 401ks and how that some employers don't match the contributions. He said that federal workers currently do get matched up to $1,000 a year, and he wants that for all Americans. And again, this is another example where you could say, well, this isn't pure capitalism again, but it is something that will help Americans because it is so hard to be able to save money for retirement like what people need to, especially with the massive inflation that we've had. So having the government match it $1,000 a year, that's going to help a lot of people. And federal workers are already getting that benefit now. So I see Donald Trump as somebody who is trying to be a problem solver. He sees problems for people and he's trying to fix them. He wants to pass something called the Stop Insider Trading Act that would mostly be targeting members of Congress or entirely. That they have inside information that allows a lot of them to enter with very little money and leave as multimillionaires because they have inside knowledge of things. He wants to put a stop to that, which, ordinary people go to prison for some of the stuff these people are doing. And he wants to put a stop to it. So even some Democrats actually seem to applaud and agree with that. He's talking about money being stolen from the American people. He said that already $19 billion in fraud has already been found in Minnesota. That's the low number on it. much of it going to these Somalis that are there, that were in Minnesota that shouldn't have been getting any benefits. And he said other states are doing even worse with our tax money. He wants a new war on fraud that'll be led by Vice President J.D. Vance. And he believes that when all is said and done, and they have checked this out all across the entire United States, that there will be enough money saved just on fraud alone to balance the federal budget. Well, I've actually heard somebody claim that based on some information they've heard, there could be as much as $1 trillion just in fraud in America. Our tax money going to people that are not entitled to benefits and stuff like that. Well, that would be a huge amount towards balancing the budget. I think it would still come up somewhat short, but it certainly would be really close. And I don't know if they've ever arrived in. I don't think they've arrived at any absolute figure yet. That was just something I heard. I don't know how accurate that is. When you start thinking 19 billion just in Minnesota, just because of Somalis, I mean, who knows what kind of other fraud's going on. He talked about how illegal aliens were getting CDL licenses and people were dying as a result of it because of traffic accidents. Of course, I'm a truck driver, and I understand what that's like when you start thinking about a bunch of people out on our highways that don't understand the laws and they can't read our signs. They're real strict about sight issues. In other words, you can be disqualified from getting a CDL license if you can't see. I don't know if it's current standards, 20/20 in one eye, and I think it's 20/30 or 20/40 in the other with corrective lenses. If you can't see that well, you can't even get a CDL license to drive a big truck. And that was because they wanted to be able to read English road signs. These are people that a lot of them cannot read signs at all. And yet they were given them licenses, again, favoring illegal aliens over Americans. That person who maybe can only see 20/40 with corrective lenses would be able to at least read English. It would just be you'd have to get a little closer to the sign to see it. But these are people that can't even read English, and they're turned loose on our highways getting CDL licenses. And the fact that they're getting them when they're not even American citizens and they're here illegally, I mean, there's definitely something wrong with that. So he was wanting to pass a law that would make it illegal for any states to issue CDL driver's licenses to illegal aliens. And I guess at the same time that people would have to be able to read English to be able to drive a big truck on our roads, which only makes sense. He mentioned about a lot of illegals murdering American citizens, did give examples of that, and had some family members there of people that lost loved ones because of illegal aliens murdering American citizens. President Trump said, and this is absolutely true, the only thing stopping illegals from coming in to our country right now is President Trump himself and patriotic Republicans, and how true that is. He then went on to talk about the Department of Homeland Security being defunded by Democrats. And he said that they were doing, I know why they're doing it. It's another one of these budget battles. They were all mad over ICE. And they were wanting to defund ICE. But President Trump was a step ahead of them, and he had funding for ICE all the way through 2029 in his big, beautiful bill that he calls it. He can't do a thing about ICE. So, they decided to throw a tantrum and defund whatever they could defund just to make a point. So they defunded Homeland Security. And that's something. They don't care anything about Americans. It's just games with them. And not only that, but they also, because of their actions, defunded snow cleanup. So if you're in a city where you've been dumped on by several feet of snow, he even mentioned New York City that the mayor up there wants to get the snow cleared, but there's no money for it because the Democrats decided to play games and defund those that would pay for having the snow cleaned up. So again, Democrats, I don't know why any American citizen, any good American at all would ever vote for Democrats today. They are completely crazy. They are just lunatics, and they're just like little children with this defunding of these things, they're just like little children pouting and doing it because they couldn't get their way in defunding ICE. So they decided to do that. And by the way, as I've mentioned in another video too, Obama used ICE a lot to remove illegal aliens. They wanted to defund them because, again, they don't even think Americans, or American citizens are even priorities over illegal aliens. President Trump actually went on to talk about how that he wanted to reaffirm the fact that for lawmakers, American politicians, their first duty is to American citizens. It is to protect American citizens, not illegal aliens. He said that, and then he was asking for those who would agree with that statement to stand up. The Democrats wouldn't even stand up saying that American citizens were priorities over illegal aliens. And after they would not stand up, the Republicans stood up and they were clapping that, yes, American citizens come before illegal aliens. He then, after he gave him plenty of opportunity, he then turned to him and said, you should be ashamed of yourself, right there to the Democrats that were in the room. And I absolutely agree with that. They should be. He also said that they needed to end sanctuary cities that are protecting criminals, because that's what they're doing. They won't let anybody deport them, even criminal illegal aliens. They won't let anybody deport them. They're protecting them in these sanctuary cities. So he said that they need to be ashamed of themselves for doing that. Some of the Democrats were even yelling out stuff. I guess they really love these illegal aliens. Now, in saying that, if you just kind of analyzing it and like, okay, why do the Democrats do that? Why? I mean, wouldn't you just think it would just be smart, even if you didn't really feel that way? Wouldn't you think it would be smart to stand up and say that, yes, as an American politician, I put Americans ahead of illegal aliens? I mean, even if it wasn't in your heart, really, don't you think it would just be smart optics and politics to stand up? Not these Democrats. Why? I think part of it is because they thought there would be a reaction from their lunatic, crazy left-wing base. Because if they were to stand up and say that, then they probably end up being, attacked by fellow Democrats. And they might even be primaried out by some of these extremists. And so they're scared more of them than they are anything else. That's probably part of it. And part of it, again, goes back to, I don't really see these people as true Americans. I see them along with the log cabin Republicans and the never Trumpers as, thinking they're citizens of the world. And they really don't think American citizens are more valuable than illegal aliens. And that's probably the reason why they wouldn't stand up for that. President Trump then went on to say they need to pass the Save America Act. And this is what the Save America Act is for. It is to, first of all, say only citizens can vote. Do you know that there's actually Democrats that don't think just citizens should vote? They think that illegal aliens that are here residing should be able to vote in our elections. That is absolutely ridiculous, but there are Democrats like that. It also requires you to show voter ID. Do you know that among just average Democrats, people that are registered Democrats in this country, I think it was 74%, maybe even a little higher, of Democrats think that you should have to show voter ID to vote, but not elected Democrats, because see, they know why they know what it takes to get elected. So they do not want it. As a matter of fact, President Trump came right out and said that these Democrats clearly don't want voter ID and stuff, because this is according to President Trump, that they have to cheat to win. I am not going to say that myself, because YouTube will probably turn around and say that I made a claim that cannot be proven. But why would you? You do have to ask yourself, and I'll just leave it at that. Why would you be against voter ID or showing ID when you vote, when you have to show ID to do just about anything? Why would you have an issue with that? I mean, I don't get that either. If you think that everything is already on the up and up. He said that citizens, you have to prove citizenship to register initially. So if you're not a registered voter, in your first time registering, bring proof that you're a citizen. That seems like it's common sense. And given all of the illegal aliens that have flooded our country, it makes perfect sense to require that. He wants to stop these mail-in ballot elections, except in cases where it's really necessary, like absentee ballots, traditional absentee ballots, because you're going to be out of town or something like that. But just to be like mail-in ballot elections, he said he wants to put a stop to that. I'm all for that, 100%. Matter of fact, I would, even though it would be a hardship on me personally, I would rather just see him go back to one-day voting based on what I'm seeing taking place, and also to give people a feeling that the elections are actually secure. I think it would be probably the smart thing to do. But even if you're going to have early voting, let's limit it, to just maybe the weekend before the election or something like that. Maybe that would be the only time you could do that. Me personally, I'd like to see paper ballots, but he didn't mention that. But I would like to see all paper ballots again. But again, he didn't say that, so that's just me throwing that in. But he does want to stop these, voting by just sending in your ballots, except for traditional ballots that you would do for absentee. He also wants to stop schools from transitioning minors, in some cases without parents' consent. He actually brought a lady in there, a very nice looking young lady who, when she was younger, I think it was about 14 years old, this school was trying to transition her into a boy. She ended up not continuing that. She ran away, and now she's no longer wanting to transition, she wants to remain female. You can't make decisions like that for children. It's ridiculous in the first place. But Democrats seem to be in favor of that. I've heard them argue for it, and even not telling the parents, and even requiring the parents in some cases to affirm it, or taking the children away from their parents, which is, see, to me, transitioning children is child abuse. They'd say not affirming it is child abuse. And Donald Trump said, he was asking who would believe that this would even be something we'd be discussing in America. And I have to agree with that. At one time, nobody would have believed that. And then he said, Democrats are crazy and destroying our country. And to that I say amen and amen. They certainly are. He said, well, we put a stop to that. Well, he did for now. And I want to see, I hope the American people never put the Democrats back in power again. I hope not. Or we're going to go right back to the open borders. We're going to go right back to all the transitioning of children. Some of these people have been just destroyed when they got older, and they can't just go back again. They've been taking hormones that they didn't need. They've been having their bodies changed in ways they can't reverse it. It's just absolutely despicable. And we're talking about children. Now, me personally, I don't even think it should be allowed at all. I don't think that we should be changing people's sex. But if you're going to, and I seriously doubt America is going to take away the freedom to do it, at least make sure it's at least the person's 21 years old and making an adult decision, not children. It's absolutely despicable that anybody has been transitioning children, especially the parents not even being involved in it, the parents not even having a say in it. But he did go on to mention these things, and these were all things that the Democrats refused to support. The Republicans would stand up and applaud, but the Democrats would just remain in their seats, and that was the last time that happened, dealing with the transitioning. That's when President Trump said Democrats are crazy and destroying our country. How true that is. After that, President Trump said that he was very happy to see a renewal in faith, Christianity, faith in God in our country, which I thought that was absolutely wonderful hearing from the President of the United States. And he also took some time to remember a man who was martyred for his faith and his beliefs, and that was Charlie Kirk. He also recognized his widow, Erica Kirk, who was in the audience. President Trump went on and said that we are one nation under God. He said we must reject all political violence. And he said that he loves seeing a resurgence in religion and it making, and basically increasing in influence in our country. I totally agree with that. And so I love seeing the president do that. He mentioned about an incident about immigrant violence that took place in Charlotte, North Carolina. He mentioned about how that as a result of his efforts sending the National Guard into different cities, the crime rates were coming down to record lows. He mentioned Memphis, New Orleans, Washington, D.C. as real success places, something that I had suggested before President Trump did. Not that I told him this, it's just something that I've been telling people online. You got these high crime cities, send the National Guard in there and let them help to bring the crime rate down, something that I totally supported then, and I still support that. He mentioned about how that he is restoring safety and security. He mentioned about ending several wars, and then when some Democrats started yelling out that he was lying, because that's what Democrats do, he actually gave the references to the countries he was talking about where he had ended wars. When they were yelling that, he said, sick people, speaking of the Democrats. I couldn't agree more. That's the way I look at the Democrats, sick in the head. I've said before, radio talk show host Michael Savage, I think he ought to get a Nobel Prize in medicine for identifying a mental illness, liberalism, because he's the one who came out and said liberalism is a mental disorder. I could not agree more. So, maybe on a future time he can get the Nobel Prize for medicine for identifying this mental disease and find a cure for it. We need to give him some kind of a medal for that. If we can find a way to cure people from liberalism and progressivism. I don't know what it would take. Maybe it'd take Jesus. I don't know. It's going to take something to fix their disorder. Some would just say it's Trump derangement syndrome. That is part of it. On top of normal liberalism and progressivism, there is Trump derangement syndrome. Very, very serious mental illnesses. And something needs to be done about it just to save our country, as far as I'm concerned. He mentioned about getting the bodies returned of living and dead people that were killed over in Gaza. And he even mentioned that Hamas and Israel were working together to find the bodies, which I think that's amazing when you think about it. He mentioned about how that Iran had been getting a nuclear program going and had been working on it. We're getting closer and closer to having the ability to hit our friends in Europe, and how eventually they would be able to hit the United States of America, that Iran is the number one sponsor of terrorism, and that could not be allowed. It was a security issue, and so he instituted Operation Midnight Hammer that destroyed Iran's nuclear program. He went on to say, Iran is continuing to try to build a nuclear program in spite of the fact they were set back. He is in negotiations with them to try to settle it peacefully, but he is determined that they will not have nuclear weapons. Basically, it's going to either come through negotiations. He says they want to negotiate, but he will accept nothing more than them ending all nuclear weapon aspirations forever, and that's what it's going to take. He mentioned about how that through his administration, they are spending money building up the military and the necessity of that because of the need for peace through strength. Absolutely right. We've got to be having a strong military if we're going to be able to defend ourselves. At one point in the speech, he also mentioned about his baby, as he called it, Space Force that he created, that's also now working to help protect America. And that is so true. I mean, there wouldn't be a Space Force if it wasn't for President Trump. He mentioned about how that NATO allies are upping the amount they're spending now to be members of NATO, up from 2% that they weren't even paying to 5% of GDP, which is helping as far as the cost. America was footing the bill pretty much entirely, but now they are paying more of a share of it. And that's a lot more than it was before. 5% from 2% is a pretty good jump, and it's really 5% from nothing, according to the way he was thinking they weren't paying the 2%. He also mentioned about servicemen getting a warrior dividend of $1,776, something that he wanted them to have and said that they deserve it. And I totally agree with that. And that was pretty much the main things that I saw in the speech. Most of the things that he said, I absolutely approve of. In about maybe 3 different areas, there were some things that really are not things that I would consider conservative or that a capitalist would want to support. I'm not sure that those are the ways I would go on them. However, overall, I absolutely love what President Trump is doing. I think he is working very hard to make America great again, while he's having to defend not only with enemies foreign, but he's having to deal with enemies domestically that are trying to do everything they can to stop him from helping Americans. They love the illegals just as much as the Americans. They let that be known openly when they wouldn't even stand up and say, yes, we acknowledge that our first duty is to American citizens. They love illegals as much as they do, if maybe more than American citizens. They sure treat them better. So I applaud President Trump for what he's doing. I am so grateful that the Lord sent him here to stop a lot of the things that the Democrats have been doing. And when you look around and you start looking at who are the enemies domestically, to me, it is the elected Democrats for the most part. I might make an exception for Senator Fetterman. I certainly don't look at Senator Fetterman as a conservative and all, but he is showing that in a lot of areas, maybe not all, but in a lot of areas, he's showing that he's willing to do things for the good of the country as he sees it and not just follow a party line, which has gotten him a lot of attacks within his own party. So maybe I'll give him, exclude him when I'm saying this. But when I look at the rest of the elected Democrats, the House of Representatives, the Senate, there could be a handful in the House that have been putting country ahead in some areas. But for the most part, all these elected Democrats, I would even say the ones that are governors of states for the most part. And when you start talking about never Trump Republicans, log cabin Republicans, to me, these are enemies domestic. These people do not love America. Oh, they'll tell you they do, but I don't believe them because they are actually fighting to stop President Trump from being able to fix things for average American people. And even in the areas where that I may not fully agree with his methods, I would rather see him get a chance to try to fix things and kind of give him a rubber stamp right now than I would want to stop him, because I see him as doing so much good. And I am so glad that he is president of the United States again. I'm so happy he's the president now that, when we start talking about 2020 and what may have happened in 2020, I'm really happy about the way things turned out, because if President Trump had continued on as president for that second straight term, he wouldn't be president today. His second term would be over with, and who knows where we would be. But because of the way it turned out, he's our president now. I've even told some people, as far as I was concerned, he was still my president even during the time when Joe Biden was the president officially. I never really looked at Joe Biden as the president. I've always looked at Donald Trump as the president, except for the harm that Biden did. Trump couldn't do anything to stop it. But anyway, I think it was a great speech that he gave. I think it exposed the Democrats for what they really are. And I hope more Americans see the Democrats for who and what they really are. Sitting there watching them, or watching these Democrats sitting there refusing to get up, even to say they put Americans ahead of illegal aliens, sitting there looking like they were pouting. If you watch the State of the Union speech, just look at their faces. They look like they were pouting. And like little children, because they didn't get their way on something or other. I am so thankful and grateful that I have never been a Democrat in my life and have no association with that party, because I would be ashamed to be a Democrat today. And I'd be ashamed to ever say that I ever voted for a Democrat for any office in this day and time. That's all I want to talk about on today's Deconstructing Leftists. Hopefully I'll get a chance to go back and look at some of the stuff that the Democrats are putting out on YouTube to try to attack President Trump for trying to save America. Seeing how they tried to defend being against voter ID, although I've heard their stuff before. President Trump even called them out on it, saying it's racist and stuff like that, which is absolutely ridiculous. He called them on a lot of these things. But I will try to go back and look at some of these things, even though I have no desire to do it. But I'm going to try to go back and do that so I can see what they're saying and at least comment on a little bit of it. I'm not going to waste your time on a bunch of videos on it. I might just kind of go back and hit some of the highlights of some of the things they're saying. And they did this ridiculous counter thing. They were calling it, Real Americans, State of the Union, or some kind of junk like that. And you had these vile people up there cussing and stuff and just saying a bunch of nonsense and spewing nonsense. I didn't watch their thing, but I did see a few clips of it that were brought up on some other people's channels. And it was just absolutely a vile mess. Hardly anybody watched it. I mean, it was disgraceful. And really, you know what? I could be over here, mocking them for nobody watching it, but maybe it's a shame more people didn't see it. Because if you could compare the Donald Trump State of the Union address to that mess that the Democrats did, I think it would cost them even more votes. So I'm kind of sorry that more people didn't see that mess for that reason, but it wasn't worth watching and putting yourself through all that and making yourself watch that stuff. So anyway, again, I'm just so thankful that I am not a Democrat. And I'm also thankful that I am not somebody who has fallen for the deconstructing from Christianity nonsense. As you know, if you've been watching my channel, I deal with the idea of deconstructing leftists came a lot because the term deconstructing was used by a lot of liberals that deconstructed from Christianity. They'll use that term about deconstructing. And so I'm so glad I never fell for that. But sadly, too many people have. And so I'm going to, by the grace of God, I'm going to try to keep making videos and trying to do my little part to help save America from progressives, liberals, Democrats, log cabin Republicans, never Trump Republicans, and even more wicked than all of them, these ones that are deconstructing from Christianity and trying to lead people out of the faith and into hell. Again, that's where I want to leave off today. Thank you for joining me. If you're not a subscriber to my channel, I want to invite you to subscribe. Take care, everyone.